Hello and welcome to the Echo of Connections podcast with your co-hosts, me, Gabe Hansen, and my mom, Dawn Hansen.
Hello and welcome.
Welcome. So for this one, we're doing episode 2, maybe. Might be a little out of order. But for this one, we're talking about our goals and where we're going, right?
And ideas and what's come to us in the process of creating the idea and sending it out there that we're making a podcast.
Yeah.
So
for this particular one, we want you take it away.
Okay. So part of what was fortunate after we decided to make our podcast is I got to go to training in Florida. And as a result...
And just as a reminder, like, it's training for your union, right?
Yeah, so the training is because I'm on the executive board for our union, and as a part of I'm the vice president of the executive board for the union, which makes it so that I'm allowed or have the privilege of going to trainings. This particular training was put on by our attorney's office, who puts together conferences.
And the attorney that represents your union.
Yes.
And just a reminder for everybody, that would be the Springfield Police Department. Or do we want to go back?
Yeah, Springfield Police Department. Our association is the Springfield Police Association, and with that, we actually have 5 members on our executive board.
Yep.
And I've been on the board, off and on the board, for the last. The first time I was on, it was in 1998, before you were born.
Yeah.
And so this is my 4th time on the board.
Yeah, I don't remember you ever not really being tied to it some way or
we're all
shape or form.
But what's nice is in the beginning we didn't used to have trainings back in the
because that's a rather new thing, right? Because I don't remember you ever having to go for e-board training back in the day.
We would just sort of be like, okay, what's this, how do I represent somebody? We would just wing it, and we had an attorney. We always have an attorney who would come in and take care of the more complicated things. But it's nice to know what our rights are. Yeah. And what the laws are. Surprise. Weird. Yeah. I think it's really important to know. In this last training, the attorney, Will Aitchison, was going into great detail about how the government, like how the federal government has different laws, like the Americans with Disabilities Act. Yeah. Which I didn't understand how important that was in terms of protecting
the act.
The act itself actually offers protections for people who are employed who have things like diabetes, heart disease. All of those things are protected because it's actually not really any part of the employer's business, in the sense that the law says just because you have those illnesses doesn't mean you can't be employed. So if you are working for a place and they determine that you have, you end up with diabetes, they can't be like, nope, you're out. You have diabetes. You can't work there anymore. And the other thing that was just recently passed, I don't remember I can't think of the act right now, but I think it's called the Genie Act, which makes it so that your genetic material,
that makes sense,
so your DNA, what your DNA is, can't be used in an employment position. And I thought, well, how is that important? Where does that matter?
Has it ever happened?
So here's where it comes into play. When we get employed or are hired as police employees, we have to go in for a physical, and part of that physical, in a pre-employment position, it sounds like to me, the doctor shouldn't be asking you, do you have a history of diabetes? Do you have a history of heart disease? Because they're not there for your history, which is not part of your employment process.
They're there to see if you're physically fit
to do the job now.
Okay, yeah.
And so that part comes into play, and I was like, oh, okay. Now it matters. Now it's important. Okay. So that's part of what the training was for sort of what the laws are. And it's interesting also that, sick use time is one of those catchy things that is a problem. Like, some people really use a lot of sick time. Some people
play that game. Yeah.
Yeah. And they never have any sick time on the books and all that. Anyway, so
just like a vacation extended.
Exactly. And so we they talk about how the law makes that a challenging thing for employers to try to reel that in. Yeah. And it, for everybody else who's working, even though the person's calling in sick all the time, it can be frustrating.
Yeah. So I imagine so, yes.
It causes more stress, when you're already working a 45-hour week and then suddenly you are last second having to stay more. That causes stress.
So you went to this training to learn about your rights, or
so that was part of it. And then it actually was a wellness symposium, and with the auspice of how laws in different states have made it so that they want police and fire employees to have wellness, and they recognize that the stress and trauma that police and fire go through impacts their wellness, which impacts their ability to do their job,
like their physical and mental and like longevity of life.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
That's good. There's forward momentum there.
Yeah, the training was really good. There was different presenters. So there's Will Aitchison, who does like the law part, and then Stephanie Kahn is a doctor, actually a psychologist in Portland, who wrote a book on resiliency, and her book is all about. She comes from a great history. She was a dispatcher. Her dad was a police officer. She became a police officer. She married a police officer. She saw stress around trauma and watched as she shared some really good stories about what led her to figuring out, why do some people make it through? Like, what is it?
And not get too affected by it? Or
they're affected, but then
they survive it.
They survive it. And is there things that we can do, or the individuals can do, that make it so that we can be more like that guy who's making it through seemingly okay? What is that thing?
So just a quick side note, did she ever find out what makes a person survive a situation that's traumatic? Or
well, one of the things that was determined, and there's a lot of studies and there's a lot of books. I have a list of books. Every time I go to these trainings, people refer to other books that are just like, oh, I want to read that. So Grit is one of them, because Grit is a book that she referred to. And what that's talking about is I haven't gotten the book yet, but resiliency is one of those determinations of what makes it so that you can come back and still be okay, like still be yourself at your core. Okay. Like it's not changing you to be, the job, which we all change a little bit, but do we fundamentally still remain dedicated to being a good person, or are we just tired of it and like, screw this, I don't want to do this anymore? And you guys, whatever problem you guys have, good luck. May the good Lord take a liking to you, because I'm done.
So it's not like empathy,
right?
Sort of empathy kind of thing. Or?
I think so. I think her book is. I wish I had it with me, because it's not that far away. Maybe I could bring it in next time.
You have it?
I do.
No,
I have a signed copy.
Oh,
because this is the second training I've went to with her. The first training was about peer support, and her dynamic. She got to present to us, I believe, for like 2 hours. The first time I saw her.
Yeah,
and it was just one of those. Wow, that lady gets it. She understands how. How difficult.
A lot of similar thoughts you've had before.
Exactly, and it's refreshing to have somebody understand that trauma is all over the place, and that it can come from, one of the analogies. I
want to say an evolving thing.
That's a what?
A trauma is an evolving thing.
It can be. I mean, obviously, there's certain things we all agree. Some of the hardest calls that officers, dispatchers, EMS people deal with, and hospitals, is the death of a child. The unexpected, violent death of a child. We all go,
I think everyone understands that.
Right? Everybody can understand.
Death of your own child or death of any child.
And, we had a case just last summer where, I got the call from a family.
Yeah, I think you talked about this one before. But
this is a really good trauma example, because so I'm going to just, So the family it's a home that has many different adults living in it. The child is 2. The child can't be found. So I get the phone call from the mother, who is not super upset at that point, but can't find the child, and
sort of dismissive about it, or
it's odd. It's very odd. I've taken a lot of missing, like my can't find my child calls, a lot.
And you think parenthood would be hysterical? Yeah.
They usually are. Like, I would say this is the first time that I can think of where I was not really clear about what was going on, because they were so calm.
So were they cold and not calculating, but
no,
or were they just sort
disconnected?
of disconnected? Which, as far as I do know, that is part of stress. Some people
it
react to
is,
stress.
but it was really weird because it wasn't like we've already found the child and something's wrong. It's my child is missing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the hyper, like, we've got to start looking, where are you guys? You got to get here and start searching. And then we couldn't nail down the time, like how long it had been since we'd seen the child, who last was with the child, what the child was wearing. There was no recollection of what the child was wearing. And so those were all clues to me that something was really wrong. And when the officers were getting there, it was sort of a slow start because a lot of times children are found. A lot of times it's not weird. A lot of times it just, kids wander off and go to sleep somewhere else, in the laundry room, or, they've gone into a closet nobody thought to look in, or we thought they were outside and then they went back inside. Those are all very common.
I remember hiding in closets.
Right? Everybody hides in closets. Very good place to be as a kid.
Yeah.
So the weird part is the person I'm talking to's reaction. So I remember sending the primary officer a message and saying, something's not right here.
Yeah.
And when they got there, and they started trying to interview the people who were supposed to have seen her last, which was the uncle of the child, the mom, and then I believe a boyfriend, they couldn't really pin down a timeline. And so more officers are coming in the area and they're searching, and now neighbors are starting to search and they're trying to figure out where the child is. And we're all, like, the sergeant leaves the station going, something's weird here. We only have 6 officers and the sergeant. So we had 2 on something else. That was another important problem. And the officers. So they get there and they're starting to search. And finally they find the little person drowned in the pond.
The neighbor's pond, right?
In the neighbor's pond. And
so I had a question. I remember you told me the story last year when it happened. I had a question later, which was, it was a backyard pond, right?
I believe so.
Do the neighbors have fences?
I don't actually know. I don't know.
Okay. Because I just, it's like one of those things where, like, if there's no fence, then it makes sense how, like, a child got there. But if it's a fence, then...
I never asked the officers. And here's why I didn't ask.
Dramatic as shit, isn't it?
It is. And the officers that were there have kids the same age, which it never seems to fail.
That's going to be so rough.
It is. It really is. And, the family, everybody was just devastated because that's the last thing you want. We all thought, the child's just hiding somewhere different. That child is just, sleeping in a different room under whatever. So the emotional drain it takes, especially once the child was found, it's like it just adds a pale over everything that happened for that day and for those officers. And so that's trauma. There you go. There's trauma. Yeah. Then the resiliency part of that is, what is it that makes us so that we can reset and continue to come back the next day? And are those things already built in to our lives, or do we need to build them in?
What a good outlet.
What would it be?
Like, would that help with that? Like if you could come home and, like, de-stress by watching a movie or playing some video games or hanging out with your family or whatever, and not drinking alcohol, because that's not a good distressor.
Your vote is don't drink?
Yes.
And why would you say that?
Because I know what alcohol does.
Yeah. What does it do?
Well, it's a depressant. So it makes you, like, sadder.
Yeah.
After your first shot of hard liquor, because that first shot is an antidepressant. After that, it's a depressant.
So, on the movies when they're like, hey, give her a little snifter of brandy. Yeah. What if you had a snifter of brandy?
The one is fine.
The one?
But because it makes you feel better, you associate better with the drink. With more. And then you get depressed. And you're like, well, if I have a little bit more, I'll feel better. And that's how alcohol gets you down this rabbit hole.
Down the rabbit hole depression. I don't know. For me, I had to make my own choice on that because alcohol and I don't get along anyway. On
a stomach level.
Yeah, physiologically, me and alcohol are not good.
Yeah, I get that from you.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I make other choices that are not good either, like sugar. I love sugar. Food. Comfort.
Speaking of food.
Yeah. And speaking of how bad habits, or I don't know if bad habits is the right word, but habits that end up causing other issues and trying to deal with trauma and trying to be resilient and come back and do the next best right thing. You know, that's where my habits have run astray. Food is definitely one of them.
What do you mean?
Like just eating sugar, like, you know, like after, I do remember, I'm pretty sure after that incident, there's a vending machine kind of a system. And I think I went and got M&Ms. I'm like, I'm going to need some M&Ms for this. This is going to take some peanut M&Ms right here. There's no way. It's not like you can go off in a corner and cry somewhere. And that's not exactly the emotion I wanted, that I really felt like having.
I think for that particular example, it probably hurts because you don't know the kid.
Don't know the kid.
You don't know the family.
Don't know the family.
So you just have this, like, if you have a kid that age as the cop, I could just imagine. I mean, I could be wrong.
And that's why.
But they probably like superimpose their own child there.
Yeah.
Right? So that's probably where the trauma is coming from. Is what do you call that? What do you call that emotion they're feeling? What do you call that event?
So do you okay, and I hear what you're saying. And do you think that it's helpful to have a label?
I think it's helpful to have labels, yeah.
So that we can just differentiate between
any kind of like, maybe not disorders, but like any kind of
emotional
or
reaction,
mind-related problem. It is helpful to have labels.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just found it curious that. So what do you label it? Because I remember coming home. I distinctly remember there's a pair of pajamas that you were wearing when I came home, because we had and this would have been in like 2002.
I was say I don't wear pajamas in like
you were like 2 or 3 at the time. And in fact, based on the pajamas, I'd say you were 2 that I'm remembering. And I remember coming home when you were asleep in your crib and you had Danks, the special blanket.
I had it really young then, yeah.
And I had to touch you because I there would have been a horrible call.
Yeah.
And at the time of the call, I didn't think of you in particular. I wasn't thinking of you. I was thinking of what we can do and how we can help this person and what was the best thing. Did it click
when you got home and saw me?
It was as soon as I hung up with the person.
Oh.
And then it was, and I don't even remember what the actual incident was, but the officer, when we found, and the child was dead, when we found out Annie was 2.
That's how traumatic it was, though.
Yeah.
Is you have immediately erased the event.
I did erase the details of the event. Yeah, I just remember seeing you in your bed.
But you still have the trauma of, having a child that age.
I did call home to talk to Pete and just be like, hey, is Gabe okay? I just, give him a kiss for me. Because I worked night watch at the time. And when I came home, I did go in your room and stroked your little blonde hair and tucked Danksy around you. So I would imagine that officers that were on that call did the same thing. Went home, checked their children, called their children maybe when they cleared that call, called their wives just to be like, hey.
Now, since I've grown up and you keep having things because life repeats itself.
Children keep dying.
Do you still have that same thing now when that 2-year-old died? Did your first response, you hung up the phone? Was it to call me, even though I'm at home and I was 22 at the time?
Yeah.
So.
I don't think I had the instinct to call you because I knew you were okay, but I think I texted you that night.
You might have done.
And just say hey.
Was I living here with you at the time?
No.
Yeah.
No.
That extra step.
I don't believe so. I have had other calls where there was like a car crash of a kid that was more in their 20s. Where I have reached out to you specifically, or when there was a crash that was in an area I thought you were going to be in when it was. And also when the riots were over by where Alex lived.
We didn't hang out that period.
No, I just
lined up with COVID being its peak, so he was out of town. Remember? So
I think I ended up a couple times.
The reason to go downtown just
became nothing.
Yeah.
But I reached out to you specifically to just make sure you're okay.
The closest they got was across the street.
They did march through our neighborhood, our old neighborhood.
Yeah, well, they did the other piece because remember
the other half.
Our road went across the main road nearby, so one half of the neighborhood was on one side. Yeah, the other half was the other side.
The ritzier side was where they marched.
The richer side was definitely.
Where they marched, and that
was only what, like 10 of them.
I don't even know how many people, but
it wasn't a whole lot.
No, it wasn't. And it wasn't violent at all.
No.
It was just loud. But anyway,
where were we?
Where were we? So back to training. Resiliency.
Yes, back to training.
And so it's a curious question to ask, what is resiliency and how do people build it? What does it look like? And how do you know?
Is it built?
Is it built?
Because do you not come sort of just like
Prepared,
or is it like a passive stat, if you will, build over your life experience, like your experiences and stuff?
I don't know. There just appear to be a group of people who have a baseline of resiliency to start with.
Yeah, and then they build from there, or?
I think so. I mean, I don't really know. I'd love to hear other people's experiences in resiliency. What do you think about resiliency in yourself? Do you have?
I guess just sort of going through life, even when it's rough. I don't know, like, I don't really have a great example.
Yeah. So, and then so that was one of the parts of the training. There was so much to it. The other part of the training that was really interesting is Scott Vinson, who's agreed to be on the podcast as well. Ooh. Who is a sergeant from Bend. He's retired from Bend PD, and he has put together a really comprehensive officer wellness program with a focus on heart health, screening.
A lot of cops end up dying with heart-related stuff.
Exactly.
Which further, I think, evidence or sign or whatever that your brain is everything when it comes to emotions.
That your brain is or is not? Is not
everything.
That your heart has some.
Yeah, because there's like your stomach and your whole like that system is like a second brain.
You're right.
And I think that like the same thing with your heart really does symbolize like certain emotions.
The heart of a matter, right? Yeah. And the heart of how we feel.
Like when you're like fight or flight.
Yeah.
Your heart starts going crazy, right?
Right. Adrenaline dumps all the time. Yeah. And there's a certain point in I think everybody in their career in police and fire and all that can really relate to. There's a point when you're first new, like everything's exciting and you have an adrenaline dump every time you have a pursuit, or an adrenaline dump when there's an officer says they have somebody at gunpoint, or an officer shouting that they need another unit because they're fighting with somebody else, or
the excitement of your first whatever.
Yeah. And maybe your first several years of, oh my gosh, and then we had to send officers code 3, and then the officer, oh yeah, I was driving code 3 and my heart was just going through my heart,
So maybe it only is traumatic to be a cop, or hard to be a cop, 5 years or whatever, like after the excitement is gone from the job, and then it's just your monotonous, like, I gotta go here, do a traffic stop, I gotta go here, do.
I don't know that, because it's not monotonous, but what ends up happening is the adrenaline dump stops.
Well, that's what I mean, like, you get burnt out, or not burnt out, I guess I'm not using the right word, but you just get sort of used to it.
Complacent maybe, or
like
sometimes, but it's just there's very rare occasions now that an adrenaline dump for me will happen. But when they do, that symbolizes to me or signals to me, this one's pretty bad, because it's my tolerance or my threshold is way high, like as high as my eyebrows. And then if something happens that actually does spark my adrenaline, then it's above my head. I'm like, oh, good God, that's something big. Anyway.
Maybe you get used to the adrenaline.
Well, there's a point where it just doesn't happen. I don't get an adrenaline rush for call. Like people be screaming at me and calling me names and why can't you get here? And all sorts of horrible names that I'm like, should I say them or not say them on the podcast? Anyway, horrible names, and insulting me and my religion, and everything about me and everything that has to do with me and why cops are horrible. That part to me, it can be annoying. It can be problematic. It is not what makes me angry. It is not what gets my adrenaline up. What gets my adrenaline up is institutional betrayal. When somebody within our management has decided to do something that is not in the best interest of the city they represent, the people they represent, or the entity of the police department, I lose it and my adrenaline gets up there and I get angry. People could call me names all day long. It's the institutional betrayal that is the problem.
It's kind of like you getting stabbed in the back.
Yes.
Like it's a blind side of like, whoa, why is a person who in the same trench,
right? I thought we were all pulling the same horse out of the mud together. Like if you have a rope and I have a rope and that's the lead guy who says pull the rope that way, I'm with you. I'm pulling the horse. If the guy that's telling us to pull the rope that way suddenly cuts the rope, walks behind us and goes, well, I never told you to pull the rope that way. I'm a little upset about that. I'm a little betrayed by but you told me to pull the horse that direction.
I could see why. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's so many examples of good officers, great officers who've been part of and dispatchers and call takers and records people. I mean, I can just think of all these people who have a heart and soul, who have tried to do and be the right kind of people, who end up being coached or criticized via email. Criticized via email. To me, the worst thing I can think of is do. You get to work. Dum, 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 dum. All right, first thing I do, I got to log into my computer. I got, that first set of passwords to get through. Then I've got to open up 3 different programs to make it so I can even operate and work. Then I get my email open. Boom. First thing you open up, oh, what's this? Oh, it's from my supervisor. Oh, it's not thank you for coming to work. It's why in the hell did you get this wrong? And why did you do that wrong? And why did you do this wrong? And this was wrong and this was wrong. You're like, holy moly, I've only been here for 5 minutes and I'm already diminished.
Now, coming to you personally here, I don't know how much you want to talk about on the podcast, but that sounds a lot similar to how it would be when you were talking to Dad.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So
I'm willing to talk personally.
Well, I don't know how much you want to get into that situation, but
I don't either.
It just sounds very similar.
That same, what part of it would you say?
Well, because Dad would just criticize you a lot.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I can't really think of just,
right off the top of it.
But it'd just be all over the place.
I never did anything right.
Wasn't very consistent.
No.
With it, but
no. It would be things that were minor sometimes, a lot of times, and then all of a sudden it'd be something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, I could see, I'm just out the window unlock of why I see, understanding your stress so much. Back in the day, when you were still married to Dad, your stress was so much higher. I'm seeing that, if you're getting criticized at home all the time, you're getting criticized at work when you get there for things you've done wrong. Are things you've done wrong personally, or just
Oh yeah, sometimes. I mean, and here's the fact of the matter is, I make mistakes, and in police work in particular, I try to tell everybody I ever train, I've made every mistake you possibly can make. I am never going to be the person who told you I was ever perfect, because I'm not. Yeah. And that when we deal with humans, that is part of what happens. Humans are not perfect. No. And when a lot of the information that we get from callers is wrong or not, I don't understand it, or they don't understand what I'm asking, or playing telephone.
Nothing better than that. I think it was 2020 we watched, where the woman call taker said that the black guy had a gun. Oh yeah. Right, and unarmed.
The caller was completely lying. The person in the neighborhood was not armed.
He didn't have a gun. He wasn't moving around. Wasn't threatening people.
No.
So the cop arrives
with the information from the call taker,
completely, ready to throw down with someone who doesn't, he thinks is going to shoot him.
None of the facts are right. Yeah, and that's why it's hard in the, the things I tend to make mistakes on, to be perfectly honest, is we have to also do warrants. We have to do paperwork. We have to do things that have to do with numbers. We have things that have to do with data entry, taking in and adding information. And the problems and mistakes that happen sometimes are because it's too busy. Yeah. There's too many other things that are happening at the same time. And sometimes it's just plain old complacency on my part to be. Yeah. And when people, what I don't have the same criticism. Let's see, how do I say this? We do not have a direct supervisor.
Yeah, you said this before, yeah.
So the kind of criticism we could potentially have been getting is not really that bad. But other divisions within our department have bigger criticisms. Yeah. And I personally think management through email is not appropriate. No.
I couldn't imagine your average person that I know. Mm-hmm. I have an email. I don't check it.
Oh, well,
I have a couple emails. I don't check them.
The work email, it's a requirement.
What I'm saying is that email is not a great form of communication long term.
True. Long term, yes.
You need either.
Oh gosh, and that actually is a really good point. That email,
a physical meeting,
hundreds and hundreds of emails a day.
Yeah, right. I mean.
And it'll be policy changes. It'll be updates on what we're doing different here, what we're doing different there.
Could take the time to set up an email that would sort it all, but that would take ages. And anytime something new happened,
You'd have to have a new.
You would have to resort it, redo the system.
And for me, email, I don't read every word. I skim read it, and sometimes I don't read it at all. I'll read who it's from. I'll read the title and be like, do I really need to know? Nope. And just send it on its way. Do I need to read it? Nope. And then later on, I might be like, ooh, apparently, I probably should have read that one. Yeah. But you know what? The times that it's bitten me in the butt versus how many times I've deleted them, the ratio is, I would say, less than 10%. Do we need to take a break?
No, we can just keep it going. Our dog is just being annoying. He doesn't like it when we put the headphones on. He's like, oh, they're in their own little world now.
They're now ignoring me.
But whatever. Yeah. So email, terrible. See, the thing is, I have such a limited amount of usage with email. Like proper, like email somebody emails you back. That's about as far as my email communications in my life have ever gone.
So the next part of email that is one of those catch-22. So you have a department where there's lots of different people and somebody does something great. The officers, a group, a team does something amazing. They work together. They find the criminal. They do something extra special for the victim. All of these different things that have happened throughout the years. I have a really good example. Where a lady kept having a very strange person that broke into her house, like some sort of mental health issue person, and they stole the key to her house and made it so that they were able to break back in again. Well, one of the officers took it upon himself to make sure that she was, took a report, make sure she was safe, tried to get her property back when we knew who the suspect was. And then the next day he broke in again. One of the dispatchers took it upon herself to take the information to the chief's secretary and was like, this lady needs something special. We need to change her locks. You know, she's an elderly person. She's like in her, 70s to 80s. She's an elderly person. Yeah. Lives by herself, who's been in the area, lived in the same neighborhood for over 50 years. Her whole life. Yeah. So we need to do something for this person. And luckily, there's a great response. The chief's assistant, who actually does a lot of different things to help out, reaches out to one of our community service people. They go out, they work with the woman to get her locks changed, and it's a great story. The chief does a really nice thing. He sends out an email, but in the email, he doesn't know all the story, doesn't know all the pieces, parts. Yeah. This is the part where the dispatcher took it upon herself to go the extra step. And I was offended by that because I want there to be an acknowledgement of the team. My professional, I love the team. I love when a team comes together, a team works, each piece has to have the other piece or it doesn't work out. You've got to have a good sergeant who has a good team of officers, who has a good dispatcher who knows what they need, who has a good call taker records person who works together. And
so you like it when every link in the chain is celebrated?
I love that. I like when everybody is celebrated, everybody is given bravos. And I don't mean cold-hearted or, I don't even cold, but empty. I don't mean empty like, oh, good job. Good job. I mean genuine like, wow, our team pulled it together. We knocked it out of the park. That's the stuff I like. That's what I live for. That's what gives me resiliency. That's what gives me the push to do it again. And why I've still been doing it for 28 years, because I've worked with our team. Our team has been fantastic.
So the more team go moments, the more you're like, I can keep doing this job.
Can keep doing it. Even through like really traumatic stuff like the fires in 2020.
I guess that's probably why your peer support program is so important. Yeah. It's another element of your team coming together and helping each other out.
Exactly.
And who understands what you're going through better than someone who's going through it as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Who's been there, who knows the stresses.
And not something like it, but you're going through the exact actual same thing.
Exactly.
Like when the kid's been murdered, or I don't know, I guess murdered. Drowned. Died, I guess is probably the best way of putting it. True. But when that happens, you all are there. You all are going through the exact same situation.
Right.
It's affecting you each differently.
And even if I wasn't on that shift that it happened, like let's say I mean, there's been times I've come to work and other shifts have had something terrible, similar happen. We can all be like, whoa. Hold on now. Tell me about it. Tell me what happened. What was your story? What happened for you guys?
And then the other bonus of that is because you've worked with all these people for some of them longer than, like their career or like their whole career.
Since they started.
Yeah. So when you understand them, So when they come to whoever, help them out for the peer support, they're right there. You could back them up and be like, hey, I know what you've been through because we know each other so well. And
sometimes it is not even under peer support, because one of the nice things about our agency prior to going to different shifts is that we had briefing together. And briefing together as dispatch records, police officers.
Is that done everywhere else?
Not really, no. Not that I know of. I maybe smaller agencies, and that's one of the nice things about smaller agencies is that you are a team, and as the team...
And you can know the whole team.
You can know the whole team. You can know the whole team's like, how was your kid's baseball game? How did that go? And then the peer support part comes in when we come to briefing the next day, and you can share what happened and the rest of the story. Like, was there a fence around the pond? Yeah. I mean, that would have been a good question, but we don't have briefing together anymore. And so that was not a part of the conversation.
That's kind of sad.
It is sad. It's a loss. It's a huge loss.
A loss in the peer support way. And when I mean peer support, I'm not even just meaning the program.
The formal. Yeah. You're talking in general.
You guys work together. You help each other.
Yeah. Yeah. The reality of without the formality of the title. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because
that's a good point.
Titles or whatever, really.
Yeah, I mean, to formalize something,
it's the outcome that really matters.
That's true. Anyway, so I think I'll wrap up our little talk here with some ideas of what our future people will be.
Oh, yeah, just future goals, I guess.
Future goals.
You mean what we were trying to talk to about?
Yeah, we ended up talking about resiliency. We ended up talking about peer support. We ended up talking about employment law a little bit.
I think I found my goal.
Your goal. Go ahead. What's Gabe's goal?
So before when you asked me yesterday, or I think it was yesterday, about like what my goal for the podcast would be, I couldn't tell you. Besides having fun.
Having fun. Let's have fun.
Fun is one goal, but the other goal, I think, mental health.
Mental health. Yeah.
Just like learning about mental health in general, maybe helping my own mental health situation, and then just sort of learning about it in just the scope of things.
Yeah, that's exciting. And maybe what...
Because we keep coming back to stuff like that, because it's traumas. Yeah.
And is there an area of mental health that you're...
Trauma.
And then with that...
Emotional trauma, not physical.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess that's fair. Emotional trauma. And is there an area that you want to research or get more info? Or are you just interested in hearing who we have on?
I'm just picking it up for people and just like questions as they come.
Yeah. And it's amazing just talking to like Scott Vinson and hearing his story, his actual story of how he ended up getting involved in wellness for officers. Each person's trauma ends up being something that I feel I can kind of learn and grab a piece of and think, oh yeah, there's a way through this. Somebody else has made it through. Somebody else's kid had problems and they were okay. And
I think you can think about that in everything.
Yeah, right?
Someone's already been through
what we've been through,
something with a similarity of 99.99%,
right.
like of every situation we could be through. And
there's maybe a slight variance, but
some of them have probably survived it.
Yeah, some may survive.
Yeah, I think.
So your goal is mental health. That's a great goal to learn about it.
Getting me down personally more than anything.
What is?
Mental health
is getting you down.
Yeah, your mental health. But yeah, so some of the people we want to bring on.
Some of the people,
they sound very interesting and in line with what I'm talking about.
And the other people who are just an amazing resource for all of this is, I'd like to talk to each and every dispatcher if they're willing.
That you work with, yeah.
That I work with, because there's just
and some people who have quit or retired.
Yeah, absolutely. People who have retired, people who've gone on to different careers. And there's a couple of officers I'd like to talk to. There's actually dispatchers, Tracey Komisar and Shelly Miller have agreed to come, and I haven't talked to everybody. So to be fair, I haven't had a chance.
Do we want to try to get two on at once, or just one-on-one?
I think one-on-one. And one of the nice things I think you're going to find is that each person brings their own special information, and we all have bonds in different ways. Like Tracy and I have a thing called Spree, where we do Springfield Glee, where there's a song for everything. There's a song for absolutely everything. And so we sing to the annoyance of almost everybody that we work with.
Me included.
Yeah, we're going to annoy you.
You bring home a couple.
I do. It's true. And then Shelly, and she has some great experiences working and Tracy both actually worked in different agencies before coming to Springfield. And that's really cool too. And so everybody that I work with would be amazing. And then Some guest stars from different agencies would be Brandon from Eugene Police, who is now a sergeant for the as the CNT sergeant, who went to the
what's CNT?
Crisis Negotiation Team.
Oh, I should know that. Yes.
Yeah, well, they keep changing it for me. And then he went to the FBI Academy for CNT specifically, and he has some really amazing information about negotiations in a different kind of way, about emotional support within the process of negotiating. So when you have the primary person negotiating, they have a lot of pressure and training, and their whole objective is to bond with whoever is having the problem. And then the secondary person in some of the training he was sharing was just amazing, because that person in the version that he was learning is just there to support that first person, that primary person, just to be there for them emotionally, like that whole process of like, you've got this. A grounding rod combined with a bolstering you up, like you've got this. You know what you're doing.
A bard from D&D.
A bard. Yeah, you have to play a song. Anyway, so there's Brandon from Eugene, and then there's also a psychologist from Maryland who specializes in EMDR. And she's perhaps willing to come on and talk. And I do have an interview with Christina Bohr from my best friend, my lifelong best friend.
Yep.
We celebrated our 50th anniversary of friendship. And she has an especially, she's a massage therapist who is specialized in figuring out how to help people who have chronic illness problems that have been not been able to be helped through regular medical and physical therapy. And her connection, how she thinks of things and looks at things, is just so refreshing. And one of the best parts of how she approaches things is, no guilt, no shame. No guilt, no shame. We're not here to shame people. We're not here to guilt people. We're here to how to make people better. And I love that idea.
See, I think a lot of doctors,
no guilt, no shame,
need to have that.
Right? An attitude of no guilt, no shame.
Some doctors that we've been through in the past have established a shame or guilt factor to me.
Yes. Yes. I think newer doctors are starting to realize the guilt and shame thing
does not work.
Well,
there was that I just read it like yesterday, day before yesterday. Of course, I was really paying attention too much, but they were talking about, it was like a research had been done about like fat shaming.
Yes.
Like how actually it does not work.
It goes the other way.
And I'm like, yeah, duh.
Yeah, right. No kidding.
I'm like,
if fat shaming worked, we'd all be thin.
Yeah, right. I was like, surprise, surprise. People who are concerned about their weight like that, and you fat shame them, they're going to go further into their darkness.
And more
stuff.
Spiral.
Or whatever. And and they're going to get,
spiral down more.
I'm like, duh.
So those are some episodes that we're looking for. And my goal is to try to talk to whoever and anybody who would be interested in sharing.
That's the goal for the podcast.
My personal goal?
Yeah, your personal.
Okay, my personal goal is to, I don't know, build.
See what I mean?
Build a brand.
Yesterday when you asked me, that was my exact reaction. You're like,
Now I should have asked myself, huh?
Yeah.
Fingers are pointing back at me.
Did you just say build a brand?
Build a brand.
That's, again, goal for the podcast.
Right? It's the goal for the podcast. What's my goal?
You wanted to do voice acting.
Oh, well, that's a separate thing. But yes, I do want to do voice acting.
My goal was just goal for life.
Oh,
that I'd said.
Your goal for life.
Yeah.
My goal for life, I'm looking for my second career. That's actually my goal. You're right. My second career, what we can do that would be both creative.
But it needs to be fun for you.
And this is fun to me.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It is fun.
But I just because your first career, as much as you liked it, being a dispatcher, you can't have said it's been fun.
Not always. There's been fun moments.
Yeah, but that's what I'm talking about. I mean, like, you wake up in the morning and you go for work and you're like, yes, I get to go to work now.
Which is funny because I've been on vacation now for like 2 weeks. I go back tomorrow. I go back on an overtime shift.
Yeah.
And that hasn't actually hit me yet, because the reason I know it hasn't hit me yet is I haven't hit the whole like pit in my stomach.
Oh no, we all know. I think everyone in this, like at least in America, who has to go to school, like,
or work, or
I mean school, because like if everyone could think back to when they had to wake up in the morning to go to school, nothing hurts more than waking up on that Monday.
That Monday.
And you're like, fuck.
Do you remember that Sunday? The Sunday you'd go, like, tomorrow you have to get up and go.
Yeah.
So for me, sometimes Sundays were even worse.
Yes. No.
Because the anticipation,
the day before,
that anticipation, like, will I sleep? Probably not. Well, I don't feel quite right.
And actually, this mentality is sort of what started me down the line of developing the just like, whatever, that's tomorrow's problem.
That's tomorrow's problem. Not time yet. It's not time yet. We say that at work all the time. It's not time yet.
I'm a little too good at saying that's tomorrow's problem.
Yeah, sometimes, perhaps, maybe. That might be part of the...
Yeah, it's part of my overarching problem now is that I'm a little too... That's tomorrow's problem.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for everybody who's joined us. We're hoping that if you do have any questions, comments, concerns, ideas, thoughts, that you will reach out, and we will have some connections on where you can leave us a message, send us an email.
We haven't seen all that stuff set up yet,
but we will. Thank you for listening to Echo of Connections. You can find us on Audible, on Amazon, Spotify, our YouTube channel, iTunes, and anywhere else you can find your favorite podcast. You can check out behind the scenes, bio of our guests, and blog entries on our website at echoofconnections.com. Goodbye, and thank you for listening.